Under a gray sky like a tattered cloth, the desert stretched endlessly, breathing a heavy silence as if time had stopped centuries ago. The dry air carried the scent of ancient death, and withered shrubs whistled an unknown tune under a faint wind, a warning no one had heard. At the heart of this desolate void lay a rusted car on the roadside, its doors wide open like the maw of a forest creature, leaving tire tracks etched into the sand like scars on the earth's back. Around it, corpses sprawled in tattered clothing, some intact, others dismembered, like a grotesque masterpiece painted by an unseen hand. Their closed eyes hid the secrets of an unfinished journey, and their stiffened hands pointed to the distant horizon where no salvation lay. Strangely, their ashen skin had not fully decayed, as if death here had not yet decided whether to stay permanently. Inside the car, 4 shadows stirred, muffled whispers, rapid breaths, and eyes meeting in a silence louder than screams. "We shouldn't have taken this road," one muttered. The car had stalled in the middle of the deserted desert highway, corpses littered among the brittle shrubs. An eerie calm hung over the place, beneath a sky choked with gray clouds that had not spilled rain for years. The passengers, 4 young friends, stared in horror and disbelief at the nightmare before them. John, the driver, frantically tried to restart the engine. "It won't work! Nothing's working! Can't you see that?" he shouted while the others scrambled for solutions. "This can't be real," said David, his friend in the passenger seat. "We're trapped here in the middle of nowhere with night coming fast." Lisa, the quiet young woman, tried her phone in vain. "No signal. We can't call anyone." Meanwhile, Tom, the 4th friend, gaped in terror at the corpses scattered among the shrubs. Their bodies were mangled beyond recognition, gray flesh sagging like moldy cloth. What is this?" he stammered, trembling as he pointed to a legless corpse whose hollow eyes stared emptily, as if cursing the void. Who are these people?" "Maybe they were travelers like us," Lisa whispered, voice shaking. "But what happened to them?" In a suffocating moment of silence, the stillness shattered. The lifeless corpses around them, once limp as discarded dolls, began to rise. Limbs twitched, rigid muscles crackling like snapping bones. The friends wavered between denial and dread. Was this a nightmare, or were they trapped in one they'd never escape? The corpses advanced toward them with terrifying steadiness, their feet crushing the dry grass, and their extinguished eyes seemed to be trying to grasp the last remnants of life. The air was filled with the stench of decay and death, and the sound of ragged breaths mixed with the rustling of moving bodies. It was a dreadful moment, as if it were an announcement of an inescapable fate. The friends wondered whether they were witnessing a terrible dream, or if they were trapped in a horrifying nightmare. The atmosphere was thick with fear and astonishment as the corpses slowly spread among the dry grass, moving toward them as if searching for a right to life. "What is this? What's happening?" John shouted, trying to comprehend the truth, but too stunned to grasp the horror unfolding before their eyes. "We can't stay here. We have to go," David yelled while John desperately tried once again to start the car, but to no avail. Tom, trembling, fumbled for anything to explain this madness. "They're dead. "But they're moving," he hissed, unable to comprehend the corpse's unnatural jerks. Lisa, still desperately dialing for help, found herself surrounded by pallid, twitching bodies. "Where's the rescue?" she choked out as screams and terror mounted. Suddenly, the corpses began moving toward them with strange, deliberate steps, causing complete panic among the friends. They started running frantically, abandoning the stalled car, searching for refuge in this cursed place. But the corpses followed them with unwavering determination, as if seeking revenge or wanting to drag them into the other world. Amidst the terror and hysteria, the friends desperately tried to escape from the approaching undead, which were closing in on them at a terrifyingly slow pace. The dry grass trembled beneath their feet with every step they took, while the decayed corpses moved as if obeying mysterious commands beyond human comprehension. John screamed, "This can't be real. We need to find shelter or anywhere we can hide," David shouted as he ran frantically behind Lisa and Tom, who were desperately searching for a safe place. The moving corpses were no longer just walking slowly. They had begun to accelerate toward the friends in a terrifying manner. The horrifying sounds grew louder, intensifying the fear and hastening their desperate escape. The friends ran as fast as they could, leaving behind the relentless corpses that pursued them tirelessly, determined to reach them. Tom suddenly slips and suffers a painful injury as his leg gets impaled by sharp, dry weeds that tear through his skin like invisible scalpels. The ground beneath him collapses like hungry mouths, while the scent of burning flesh rises from the nearby corpses, whose bones creak like the opening of an infernal gate. Before he can grasp what is happening, a pale, swollen, decayed hand emerges from the sand, wrapping its rotting fingers around his ankle like a black serpent strangling its prey. He screams in terror, begging for help, but the surrounding corpses begin to move faster, as if his cries fuel their sinister motion. Their dangling feet pound the ground like hammers, heralding the arrival of an unstoppable force of destruction. Before losing consciousness, he saw the shadows of his friends fading into the horizon, while the desert ground slowly swallowed him, as if death here was not an end, but a feast. At the same time, Lisa, David, and John kept running without stopping, searching desperately for any escape from this bloody nightmare. But the corpses pursued them mercilessly, drawing closer with every step they took. As the undead neared Tom, his screams pierced the silent night, sending waves of terror through his fleeing friends. "We have to go back and help him," John shouted, turning around, but David and Lisa grabbed him by the arms. "We can't go back. There are too many of them," Lisa cried, her eyes filled with horror and despair. At that moment, they heard Tom's final scream, turning into a terrifying murmur before the sound completely faded. They realized he had fallen into the grasp of the corpses, and there was no time to mourn him. They kept running through the rugged, rocky path, despite their exhaustion, knowing that stopping was not an option. Suddenly, David spotted an abandoned building in the distance and shouted, pointing towards it. There stood an old, deserted structure, appearing like a last refuge in the midst of this desert hell. They rushed towards it with all their remaining strength, sweat dripping from their foreheads and fear gripping their hearts. By the time they reached the entrance, they were wounded and scratched by thorns and rocks, but the hope of survival gave them one final push forward. John shoved the rusty door open with all his strength, and they stumbled inside the building, which was engulfed in terrifying darkness. They slammed the door shut as quickly as possible and leaned against it, gasping for breath. Inside, the air was thick with a foul stench, and the walls were cracked and covered in mold. "Are we safe here?" Lisa asked in a trembling voice, her eyes darting through the darkness that surrounded them. "I don't know, but we need to find a place to hide," David said as he fumbled in the dark, searching for anything that could serve as an additional barricade for the door. Meanwhile, John was trying to turn on a light using his mobile phone, but the battery was about to die. At that moment, they heard strange sounds coming from the dark corridors of the building. Those sounds resembled whispers and muffled screams, increasing their fear. "We need to find a room and lock it tightly," John said, as he grabbed Lisa's hand and led her through the dark hallway. David followed them as they searched for a safe shelter in this abandoned place. As they wandered through the building, they found a small room with an old wooden door. They quickly entered and shut the door behind them, placing some scattered furniture as a barricade. They all sat on the floor, trying to control their fear and think about what they would do next. "We can't stay here forever. We need to find a way out of this place," David said in a low voice, as if trying to reassure himself as much as he was trying to reassure the others. But how? "The corpses are everywhere outside, and darkness surrounds us here," Lisa said, trying to hold back her tears. At that ominous moment, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed, like the slow pounding beats of death approaching, knocking on the doors of terror. They froze in place, their eyes widening with sheer horror, and cold sweat trickled down their trembling skin. Suddenly, the door began to shake, slowly and eerily, as if an unknown entity, a being not of this world, was trying to force its way inside. Their hearts pounded violently, almost breaking through their chests, and their breaths grew heavy and ragged, as if even the air itself had frozen with them. They were trapped. Behind them, the rotting corpses stirred in the darkness, and before them, the door separated them from something even more terrifying. Were they safe inside, or was what lurked beyond far worse than everything waiting for them outside? "We have to fight. We can't give up now," John said, gripping a wooden plank he had found on the floor, ready to defend himself and his friends. Their eyes were wide with fear, but they knew they had to fight to survive in this nightmare that showed no sign of ending anytime soon. They sat in the darkness, crouched on the ground, their heartbeats racing. The door before them shook with increasing violence, as if a monster from the realms of darkness was trying to break into the fragile shelter they had taken refuge in. The sounds from outside grew louder, a terrifying mixture of deep murmurs and heavy breathing. They were on the verge of collapse, realizing that the moment of confrontation was imminent, with the specter of death drawing ever closer. Lisa trembled, her eyes drowning in a sea of tears mixed with terror, and she asked in a choked, despair-filled voice, "John, what are we going to do?" John took a deep breath, despite the fear freezing his veins, trying to inject a sliver of hope into their ever-growing darkness. "We have to fight. We have no other choice." His voice was shaky, laced with a tremor of fear he struggled to hide. But the truth was clear. There was no longer any escape from this living nightmare. In a single moment, the door shattered, and the corpses stormed into the room. Their faces were disfigured, their bodies rotting, and their hollow eyes gleamed eerily in the darkness. Screams erupted from the friends as they tried to fight back with all the strength they had. John swung the wooden plank, desperately trying to push the corpses away, but their numbers were overwhelming. One of the corpses grabbed him by the neck and threw him to the ground. David rushed to help him, but the corpses had already surrounded him too, raining down brutal blows upon him. Lisa screamed as she tried to escape, but the corpses were faster. They grabbed her and dragged her toward the corner, her deafening screams filling the air. Terror consumed the room, and the corpses continued their merciless attack. Amid the chaos, John saw something glinting on the floor. It was a sharp blade, perhaps a fragment of a broken mirror. With his trembling hand, he grasped it, trying to make one last stand. But he couldn't move. The corpses held him too tightly. In the end, the blade slipped from his hand, and his eyes dimmed as the corpses tore into him with savage brutality. The sound faded, replaced by eerie whispers and chilling murmurs. The corpses stopped moving, as if they had completed their task. And with the last scream dissolving into the air, the desert returned to its deadly silence, while the sky, heavy with gray clouds, bore witness to the tragedy that had befallen the friends. Hours passed, and the place grew still, as if nothing had happened. Only the remains of the corpses and traces of blood were left behind. But deep within the abandoned building, the lost souls continued to whisper of vengeance, waiting for the next victims to fall into this horrifying trap.